friends, I'm Missy Lisa with St. Mary's County Library, and welcome to Fairy Tales Around the World. Today we're going to be learning about different myths, legends, and fairy tales. We're going to be doing some crafts. We're also going to be taking the summer reading theme of Imagine Your Story and doing a little bit of imagining and writing of our own. Every culture has its own myths, legends, and fairy tales, and today we're going to learn about some of those. We're also going to dive a little bit deeper into one fairy tale we know and love. Some of the fairy tales we know and love can be traced back to almost 6,000 years ago and have just been passed on through the ages by word of mouth. Today we're going to be talking about 4 stories. One from Nigeria, one from Japan, and one from the Mi'kmaq Native American tribe. We're then going to finish off by talking about a fairy tale you're probably familiar with, Cinderella. Many of the myths and legends from different cultures were stories that were used as explanations for things that back then they just didn't understand. Today we have science and technology that tells us so much about the world and the universe. But hundreds of years ago, people didn't have that. Back then, people used stories to explain things like thunder and lightning, the moon, the sun, the wind. Anything that they didn't quite understand, they created stories to explain. The first story we're going to read is from Nigeria. It's called The Story of Thunder and Lightning, and it is an explanation of what made thunder and lightning. Please feel free to follow along in the links down below. In the olden days, the thunder and lightning lived on Earth amongst all the other people, but the king made them live at the far end of town, as far as possible from other people's houses. The thunder was an old mother sheep, and the lightning was her son, a ram. Whenever the ram got angry, he used to go about and burn houses and knock down trees. He even did damage on the farms and sometimes killed people. Oh no. Whenever the lightning did these things, his mother used to call out to him in a very loud voice to stop and not do any more damage. But the lightning did not care in the least for what his mother said, and when he was in a bad temper, used to do a very large amount of damage. At last, the people could not stand it any longer and complained to the king. So the king made a special order that the sheep, Thunder, and her son, the ram, Lightning, should leave the town and live in the far bush. This did not do much good, as when the ram got angry, he still burnt the forest, and the flames sometimes spread to the farms and consumed them. So the people complained again, and the king banished both the lightning and the thunder from the earth and made them live in the sky, where they could not cause so much destruction. Ever since, when the lightning is angry, he commits damage as before, but you can hear his mother, the thunder, rebuking him and telling him to stop. Sometimes, however, when the mother has gone away some distance from her naughty son, you can still see that he is angry and is doing damage, but his mother's voice cannot be heard. So let's take a moment and think about what that story did, what that legend did. It provided an answer to what the thunder and lightning were. The thunder is the mother sheep, and the lightning is the mischievous son, the ram. It also explains why thunder and lightning are in the sky, because they were banished by the king. It even explains why sometimes you see lightning in the sky with no thunder. This is just one example of how cultures used different stories to explain different weather patterns, different things that they saw in nature that they couldn't understand, they couldn't explain themselves, so they used these stories to explain. So I have a challenge for you. I challenge you to write your own legend of what lightning and thunder are and where they came from. This can be inspired by the story we just read, or it can be totally different. It is all up to you. Now we are going to create some thunder. All you're going to need to make thunder is a paper bag. You're going to take the paper bag, you're going to blow some air into it until it's pretty blown up. You're going to hold on to the top with your hand, make sure that air doesn't escape. You're going to set it against a surface, and then you're going to take your other hand and really quickly hit the bag. The bag should pop and make thunder. Native American tribes also have stories about why things happen. Tribes have stories about the moon, the sun, the stars, the wind, mountains, trees. They have tons and tons of different stories that explain different things in nature. Different tribes have moon gods and goddesses, moon spirits. They have different explanations for why the moon has different phases, why it only comes out at night. They have tons of different stories that explain different things about the moon, and each tribe has different stories. Today, we're going to be talking about the Mi'kmaq tribe and their story called The Rabbit and the Moon. This story explains why the moon has dark spots on it. Nowadays, we know that the moon has craters, and that's why it looks like you have the dark spots on the moon, but this is their explanation as to why the moon has dark spots on it when you look at it. You can follow along down below, the links provided. Long ago, Rabbit was a great hunter. He lived with his grandmother in a lodge which stood deep in the Mi'kmaq forest. It was winter, and Rabbit set traps and laid snares to catch game for food. He caught many small animals and birds until one day he discovered that some mysterious being was robbing his traps. Rabbit and his grandmother became hungry. Though he visited his traps very early each morning, he always found them empty. At first, Rabbit thought that the robber might be a cunning wolverine, until one morning he found long, narrow footprints alongside his trap line. It was, he thought, the tracks of the robber, but they looked like moonbeams. Each morning, Rabbit rose earlier and earlier, but the being of the long foot was always ahead of him, and always his traps were empty. Rabbit made a trap from a bowstring with the loop so cleverly fastened that he felt certain that he would catch the robber when it came. He took one end of the thong with him and hid himself behind a clump of bushes from which he could watch his snare. It was bright moonlight while he waited, but suddenly it became very dark as the moon disappeared. A few stars were still shining, and there were no clouds in the sky, so Rabbit wondered what had happened to the moon. Someone or something came stealthily through the trees, and then Rabbit was almost blinded by a flash of bright white light which went straight to his trap line and shone through the snare which he had set. Quick as a lightning flash, Rabbit jerked the bowstring and tightened the trap. There was a sound of struggling, and the light lurched from side to side. Rabbit knew by the tugging on his string that he had caught the robber. He fastened the bowstring to a nearby sapling to hold the loop tight. Rabbit raced back to tell his grandmother, who was a wise old woman, what had happened. She told him that he must return at once and see who or what he had caught. Rabbit, who was very frightened, wanted to wait for daylight, but his grandmother said that might be too late, so he returned to his trap line. When he came near his traps, Rabbit saw that the bright light was still there. It was so bright that it hurt his eyes. He bathed them in the icy water of a nearby brook, but still they smarted. He made big snowballs and threw them at the light in the hope of putting it out. As they went close to the light, he heard them sizzle and saw them melt. Next, Rabbit scooped up great pawfuls of soft clay from the stream and made many big clay balls. He was a good shot and threw the balls with all of his force at the dancing white light. He heard them strike hard, and then his prisoner shouted. Then a strange, quivering voice asked why he had been snared and demanded that he be set free at once, because he was the man in the moon and he must be home before dawn came. His face had been spotted with clay, and when Rabbit went closer, the Moon Man saw him and threatened to kill him and all of his tribe if he were not released at once. Oh no. Rabbit was so terrified that he raced back to tell his grandmother about his strange captive. She too was much afraid and told Rabbit to return and release the thief immediately. Rabbit went back, and his voice shook with fear as he told the man in the moon that he would be released if he promised never to rob the snares again. To make doubly sure, Rabbit asked him to promise that he would never return to Earth, and the Moon Man swore that he would never do so. Rabbit could hardly see in the dazzling light, but at last he managed to gnaw through the bowstring with his teeth, and the man in the moon soon disappeared in the sky, leaving a bright trail of light behind him. Rabbit had been nearly blinded by the great light, and his shoulders were badly scorched. Even today, rabbits blink as though light is too strong for their eyes. Their eyelids are pink, and their eyes water if they look at a bright light. Their lips quiver, telling of Rabbit's terror. The man in the moon has never returned to Earth. When he lights the world, one can still see the marks of clay which Rabbit threw on his face. Sometimes he disappears for a few nights when he is trying to rub the marks of clay balls from his face. When the world is dark, but when the man in the moon appears again, one can see that he has never been able to clean the clay marks from his shining face. So this legend serves as an answer for many different things that happen in nature. We have an explanation as to what the moon's dark spots are, why the moon disappears from the sky sometimes, why rabbits have pink eyes and why they blink so much, and even why their lips quiver. There's lots of different answers about things in nature in just this one story. So now I have another challenge for you all. I challenge you to write your own story about why the moon has dark spots or craters. This can be inspired by the story we just read or can be totally new. It just has to answer the question, why does the moon have craters? And now we're gonna do a super fun activity that shows how the moon actually does get its craters, which is from asteroids and meteors and different things in space hitting its surface and leaving marks. So for this activity, you're going to need a plastic bowl of some sort. You can also use a plate with a lip on it. I used about a cup of flour and 1/4 of a cup of baby oil. You can use other oil as well. I also got some rocks. You can go outside and go hunting for some pebbles of different sizes. The heavier the rock, the bigger the crater it's going to make, but try to get different sizes to get different sized craters. So you're going to pour the flour and the oil into your bowl and mix it up. You're gonna wanna get your hands in there to get it really mixed in well. Then you're gonna flatten the surface as best you can. And then from different heights, you're going to drop the rocks into your moon dough. If you don't have oil of any sort, this will also work just with normal flour, but it is going to make much more of a mess with the poofing flour everywhere. After you're done dropping your rocks, pick them out and look at the craters that you made in your moon dough. And that is a lot like how the moon actually gets its craters. So some fairy tales do not provide explanations for different things in nature. Some are used to teach a lesson or show a moral. And a lot of them are about heroes. In every culture, there's at least a handful of stories about a hero of some sort who comes in and saves the day, who's really brave and strong, and usually defeats some sort of monster. And that is exactly what our next fairy tale does. Our next fairy tale is from Japan, and it is called The Eight-Headed Serpent. You can follow along down below. This one is a tad bit scarier than the ones we've read earlier today, but it is still super, super exciting and a bit longer. The Eight-Headed Serpent. The great god Susano walked by the river high. He walked for 4 days and saw no living thing. At evening on the 5th day, he lay down to sleep in the bamboo thicket close by the river's edge. He dreamed that he saw a beautiful maiden floating down the river. A great monster rose from the water and was about to swallow her, but the god swam out and saved her. Susano wondered about his dream, and in the morning he said to himself, "In this beautiful land, it seems strange that I find no living thing. I will go on up the river today, but if by night I find no one, I will return to heaven once more." As he spoke, something floated down the blue face of the river. It was a chopstick. Then the god Susano knew that someone lived by the river, so he started on to search until he found them. Toward evening, he thought he heard the sound of voices. He hurried on, and as he turned a bend in the river, he saw an old woman sitting by the edge of the water and weeping. Her husband and little daughter sat near her. Susano looked at the girl in surprise, for she seemed to be the same one whom he had seen in his dream. "What is your trouble?" he asked of the woman. "Perhaps I can help you." The old woman answered, "No one can help us. Our beautiful daughter must go as her 7 beautiful sisters have gone." "But tell me about it," said Susano, for he remembered how he had saved the maiden in his dream. "There is a great monster who owns all this land," said the man. "He is a serpent 8 miles long, and he has 8 heads and 8 tails. Each year for 7 years he has come and carried off one of our daughters. Now there is only this one, the youngest, remaining. We know that he will soon come and carry her away too. Nothing can save her." Now Susano thought that so beautiful a maiden was too good for an 8-headed serpent, so he sat down and thought how he might save her. He sat by the river bank, under the feathery bamboo, and thought. The blue face of the river turned to red and gold. Then Susano knew that the sun had set, but he did not look up. The light faded and all was dark. He knew the stars were shining, for he could see their tiny points of light reflected on the smooth surface of the water. Still, he could think of no plan. At last he said, "Morning thoughts are best. I will sleep now, and perhaps in the morning I can think of some plan." In the morning, he was up with the first light of the sun. The old woman brought him food, but he ate nothing. He sat by the water's edge and under the feathery bamboo and thought and thought. Just as the sun was sinking again, he went to the old man and woman. "Weep no more," he said. "I have thought of a plan to save your daughter. We will get up early in the morning and go to work, but tonight we will sleep, for we need rest." The next morning they were at work long before light. The old woman prepared a rich soup in 8 huge kettles. Susano and the old man made a great wall, having 8 gates in it. Before each gate they set a kettle of the soup. Then Susano bruised some leaves which he found by the riverside and put them in the soup. A delicious odor arose from each kettle of soup and floated over the mountains. Very soon they heard a great roar. "Be quick, hide yourself," cried the old man. "It is the 8-headed serpent. He has smelled the soup and is coming to get some." With a noise like thunder, the great serpent dragged himself over 8 hills. His 8 tails writhed along the ground or whipped through the air. 8 red tongues darted from his 8 great mouths. His 8 heads poked through the 8 gates in the wall, and in a moment the soup was disappearing. Susano stole up and with one blow of his sword cut off the first head of the serpent. In a moment another head was gone, then another, and another. The serpent was angry, but he would rather lose a few heads than forego the soup. Perhaps Susano had put something in the soup to make him think so. Whiz! And the tails lashed out. Whiz! And Susano's sharp sword cut off the 5th head. The snake was furious with pain, but still trying to get the last few drops of soup that were left. Susano's sharp sword flashed through the air and cut off the 6th head. Another moment and the 7th head fell. Just then the serpent turned on Susano. His great mouth was wide to swallow him, but the brave man sprang upon the monster's neck and from above cut off the last head. The great body quivered and shook until the trembling leaves fell down from the trees. At last it lay quite still, and they knew that the serpent would never trouble them again. Then Susano took the maiden up to the land of the smiling heaven, where they lived, always looking down upon the earth to see who were in trouble and helping them. So this is a great example of heroes and their roles in fairy tales. So I want you to think of 5 traits that you think a hero needs to have. Do they need to be brave, strong, kind? What are 5 traits you think a hero needs to have? Then I want you to draw your hero. Are they human? Are they an alien? Are they an animal? Are they a completely made-up creature? Are they tall? Are they strong? Do they have powers? Can they do magic? I want you to draw your hero and give them a name. Make sure that those 5 traits you said a hero should have are represented in your drawing. Last up, we're going to talk about Cinderella. I'm not going to be reading the story of Cinderella, but I will leave some links down below to where you can read the story. But the story of Cinderella is about a girl who has a stepmother and 2 stepsisters who she lives with. Cinderella has to clean and do all the chores and cook. Her stepsisters get to go to balls and have pretty dresses, and Cinderella doesn't get any of that. One day, the stepsisters and the stepmother are preparing to go to the ball, and Cinderella is told that if she finishes all her chores, she can go, but unfortunately she can't because she has nothing to wear. So the stepmother and her daughters go off to the ball, leaving Cinderella by herself. In our version, the fairy godmother comes and turns a pumpkin into a carriage. The fairy godmother turns her ratty old dress into a ball gown and turns mice into coachmen. If you will remember, she is given glass slippers to wear to the ball and told that she must leave before midnight before her carriage turns back into a pumpkin and everything goes back as it was. She goes to the ball, she meets her Prince Charming, they dance, but she runs away when the clock strikes midnight, leaving behind her glass slipper. Prince Charming goes to look for her by asking everyone to try on her glass slipper. And of course, we know the ending. He finds Cinderella, he puts her glass slipper on, it fits, and they live happily ever after. What's very interesting is there are many different versions of this fairy tale. The earliest version of this story comes from Greece from about 2,000 years ago. There are hundreds of different versions, and almost every culture has their own version of the Cinderella tale. Some of the most popular ones, of course, are from the Brothers Grimm, and the one that is actually the most similar to the one we know was a French version. This was written by Charles Perrault in 1697. His version was the first version to actually have the pumpkin turning into the carriage and the glass slippers. So in a lot of fairy tales, there are lessons or morals to be taught. Can you think of a lesson or moral that someone can learn from the Cinderella story? Maybe it's always be kind. There are lots of different morals to Cinderella, so try to sit and brainstorm what one moral might be. Now I have a final challenge for you all. I want you to take the hero that you created before and write a fairy tale starring that hero. The only thing your fairy tale has to include is a moral or a lesson. So any kind of lesson, it could be to be kind or be honest, or it could be about friendship or family, but try to write a story that focuses around a certain lesson or moral. And finally, we are going to make our own magic wands. This is a super simple craft. All you need is either a straw, a skewer, or a chopstick, some stiff paper or cardstock, some tape, some ribbon, and some markers or stickers or anything you want to decorate it with. All you're going to do is you're going to draw out your star on the back of your cardstock. I would recommend taking 2 pieces of your stiff paper and cutting them out at once using your template as a guide. After you have 2 stars, you're going to take some tape and tape your straw or chopstick or skewer to one of your stars. Then you're going to take some tape or glue if you have it and put it on the straw and then attach your other star. Then you're going to take your ribbon and tie it up by the star. You probably should decorate before attaching your straw, but of course I forgot to decorate mine, so I'm going to do that at the end. And now you have a super fun magic wand. I hope you all enjoyed learning about some new myths, legends, and fairy tales, and diving in a little deeper to stories we already know and love.